All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the 7th daily video log from Verified Elite Training System Vetselite. Today, I'm going to talk about a couple things. The first one is how to keep programs simple at the same time effective, how to know that a program's effective, and kind of overcoming overthinking and doubt that comes when you're trying to write programs, and think about your philosophy and taking on new information and hearing other people's opinions, but still being able to stay true to yourself. So the first thing that needs to be said is, in order to even begin this conversation, you have to have some sort of monitoring tool or monitoring program in whatever you're doing. So no matter how you're going to start this conversation, in the sense of we're going to talk about sprinting or we're talking about lifting, and you want to know what works, what doesn't work. In order to even start that, it's important to make sure that you have a system in place that helps you monitor what's going on. You know what I mean? Because without that, then claims that you're trying to make, or maybe a line of thinking that you have about something working or something not working, without the monitoring program, you're not even going to be able to, make it clear or have a sound background of information on where you're going with that line of thought, or where you're going with that idea, or what's even happening if you don't have something to back it up, So lifting is pretty straightforward, right? It's you go, you test at the beginning of a phase or a cycle or whatever, you test at the end, and your objective measure is that I got stronger, right? Or my competition lifts went up, or, my clean and jerk technique got better. You have those objective things that you can say, that's your monitoring. The weights are your monitoring program. The movement efficiency is your monitoring program. That way you can decide oh, hey, I went for that 1RM, and, last time I failed at the top half of the bench, or, I keep falling down in the squat, or I can't build enough tension getting into a deadlift, or, my second pull is really weak in my clean, or whatever it may be. That is an objective measure in a monitoring system that tells you what's going on. So then when we kind of dive into the next part of this, right, that gives you actual sound information about what's going on and how to then take the next step, right? Because, you have all these different methodologies, you have all these different, models and exercises and schemes, and especially now, I say now, but for all the time that I've been, really coaching and, trying to improve my programming and my philosophy and everything, there's so much information out there. There's so much, you know what I mean? It's well, what do I even start with? Well, at the end of the day, you got to make the decision about what you think and is the best way to go. But then the way you decide if you need to keep doing that is through the monitoring program that you have. So one of the biggest changes that I made was the Feed the Cats, Tony Holler stuff. That was the first kind of I'll say that's the second thing. I mean, the first thing really was VBT. I kind of always had done a VBT just because of Westside with the dynamic effort stuff, but never dove into the Tendo unit and really utilizing the actual velocity ranges. But that's beside the point. The one thing that was really hard for me was that to change and make a decision on was Tony Holler's stuff about max velocity sprinting. You need to sprint as fast as you can often in order to get the speed gains that you want. You know what I mean? Sprinting is a technical thing, and I needed a monitoring system in place to actually tell me what was happening, because what would happen is I would, run a 40, for testing when it came to the time when, I could get timers, which was usually for the guys I was training, at the end of spring or at the beginning of camp. So I had 1 or 2 times a year where I would get measurement. That's the objective measure, right? You can't see how fast somebody's running. You can tell the difference between somebody running a 5 and somebody running a 4.4, right? But Like even those, like that 1/10 difference, you can't see that. Like you need the objective measure to tell you, hey, in this past 3 weeks, I've dropped down over my standard of error. Like I've dropped down past it. Like I've seen positive improvement. That way you can say, hey, this line of thought is what's working. Let's go there. And then you can kind of start to like build on other ideas that you see out there. Like, this works. Sorry. You know that X works, and then you know that X doesn't work, right? Like, certain things are going to work and certain things are not going to work. You try them out, you see what happens. So trying to shift through all of the information that's out there, you want to have your thoughts, your objective training, and your objective measures to prove your thoughts or try to prove that something else works or doesn't work. Right now, something that I'm wrestling with and kind of going back and forth is like the proper blend of strength training and sprinting. Like, you know what I mean? Like because you have this end that's all about sprinting, and that's like, that's how you get your strength development. And, certain types of lifts, especially like the power lift type of movements, can really hurt your sprinting ability when it comes to timing, coordination, and rhythm between specific muscles and sprinting. And then you have the other end where it's like, well, no, like sprinting, what you need to do and what most people lack is being able to put enough force in the ground. So you need those heavy lifts in order to get that. So it's like, where's the middle ground? You know what I mean? Like how do you blend that together? So that's really what I'm like wrestling with right now, trying to figure out. And I think there is a proper blend. I think there's a way to do it. And it depends on who you're talking about. And it depends on the type of strength you're doing. Like sled sprinting or sled movements, I think are incredible, right? I think that's a great resource for strength training for sprinting, right? It's like insanely specific. That's specific strength exercise. When you're talking about deep barbell squat, talking about conventional deadlift, those are things that you maybe you don't know the benefits yet, especially when it comes to elite. And I haven't worked on the upper echelon of elite sprinters. I've only been with intermediate to advanced. So to actually say what works and doesn't work, it's so case specific. But in general, when most people talk about force development and trying to improve the sprinting and through lifting, most of those people don't have that force background. You know what I mean? They don't have that strength background to put that force into the ground and to be able to then sprint fast, and then now, the thing that's kind of messing me up is, that I'm working on learning is the role of the ankle and the foot in sprinting and how important it really is. And maybe that, you could keep improving those strength numbers in the squat and the hip thrust and the deadlift and, all those things, and you could still not see those improvements. And you could do that on top of sprinting all the time. I had a guy where I had a program where, his power outputs on the squat went up significantly, right? He was jumping higher, standing vert. But then when it came to sprint, even though we were doing max velocity sprints, it didn't transfer for him. I think that it was potentially because he needed more exposure to sprinting and the lifting focus was messing up his timing. But I also think it's because I neglected the ankle. That ankle complex I found is coming to find is so important. You know what I mean? It that really is the force transmitter to the ground. That's the last opportunity to get, and you can lose so much force. And the rate limiting factor in sprinting is ground contact time. It's great if you can apply as much, a lot of force to the ground, but if you can't do it in a good amount of time, you're not going to sprint fast. You know what I mean? And that's, kind of the balance where I'm trying to find between lifting and running and getting a good blend that has something that can work. But, everything's a case-by-case basis. Everything's kind of different, and depending on your situation, environment, athlete, training age, all these things, and that's why needs analysis and monitoring system is really what defines coaching. That's how you figure these problems out and work through these things. So that's kind of my insight on that end. And, I think if you're struggling with a problem, get a monitoring system and try to figure those things out. So that's my thoughts for today, and have a good night.